Well, what an incredible offering of music and what those songs represented. Starting with Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which of course is a black spiritual born out of slavery in America, people who didn't have a choice to be here, stolen from their own homeland. And from that, we get these deep, rich spirituals that speak of, in this case, a longing for something, maybe the only thing they can hold on to, because their existence in the here and now is going to be so limited. From that, moving into a song called The Architect, which questions the very nature of an architect. Is there even a God who's in control? And if that God is in control, then why the hell are we experiencing what we're experiencing? And then closing off with a song of peace. Just extraordinary. I've been giving out these certificates of meritorious awesomeness. And I have one for Reese that I had actually a couple months ago, so I want to give this to Reese Tucker Mead. She has performed extraordinary feats worthy of great acclaim, chief among those feats being Brian's sidekick, who just left, solo singer and worship leader. May the glory of these feats live long in the memory of this clan, and may the air be filled with hosannas and good tidings, such as your harmonies add so much, and your tender approach to songs is delightful. So, thank you, Reese. Awesome. Thank you. And I also want to acknowledge something else related to Reese and why this is such a particularly powerful time for her family to be here. Yesterday marks the 1-year anniversary of when Reese and Dan and Daniela welcomed their son, Eason, into the world. Wait, did I get that wrong? Evan, thank you. I knew it. Well, I am human after all. Yeah. Evan Oso Mead was welcomed into the world a year ago, and they were able to be with him and love him for 21 minutes before they had to release him back to whence he came. And we were so with you in that, and we still are with you. And I know this year has been unprecedented, unexpected, awful, horrible, and just know that we're still with you as you go through this. So it just brings all the more meaning of what you brought today. And each one of those songs has something to say about your journey in the last year. And you too, Dan. So thank you again for offering all that. And we want to honor Evan, and we are in process of finding and planting what will become a memorial tree. Probably an oak tree, we're thinking. We've got people on it, and it will be planted in our nursery play yard. And over time will grow to provide great shade for who knows how many children over time. And so when we have that in place, it takes a little doing to get all that put together, but when we do that, we'll have a proper ceremony for it. But I wanted to let you all know and to remind you that's in the works. So anyway, thank you once again. Very good. All right, so today we are talking about the subject of regrets. And I've just titled this With Regrets. And I've been following the lectionary. Whenever I'm not doing a book series or something else, I defer back to the lectionary. And it just so happens that the text today that was crafted for us well over 100 years ago, and other churches around the world teaching on this stuff, happens to be a story about political violence. So strange coinkydink given the headlines. This one's more gory, and we'll give some backstory here. I don't recommend this particular story for your children because it's pretty awful. But it's in your handout, and I want to walk you through this and see what's there. There's a couple of text notes I want to share with you as we move through this. This comes from Mark chapter 6, and this is the Message translation. And I may stop along the way. King Herod. Okay, let's stop. So, first of all, we say King Herod is really more of a governor, if you want to think of it that way. He was in charge of the region where Jesus grew up. Later in adulthood, he was the guy in charge up there. It's the Sea of Galilee, a little bit to the north and west of that. If you only read the biblical account, you wouldn't be too impressed with this guy because all you're hearing about is from this very limited Jewish perspective. But the reality is he was pretty successful. He built two pretty amazing cities in his tenure. He shows up at the end of Jesus' life and kind of mocks Jesus. He's one of those kings that he has to pass through as Jesus is being executed or on his way to execution. So that's this guy, and he has a little bit of a backstory, which you're going to see later on. John the Baptist took issue with this Herod. John the Baptist, if you remember from his story, if you saw the movie, he was a guy who dressed up kind of like Elijah of old. He looked like this kind of wild-eyed guy, preacher, camel's hair, and ate locusts and wild honey and kind of stuff, and he looked a little bit crazy, and he spoke as if from God. And so people would come by the thousands to hear what he had to say, and he really got their attention. And he was a little bit of a hellfire, brimstone kind of preacher, like clean up your act or else kind of a thing, because God is coming, and very kind of scary stuff. And this Herod actually, took note, and sometimes with great chagrin, because John would call out Herod for his own immorality. So think about this. You got this sort of prophet hanging out under the Roman Empire's thumb, and he had the audacity and bravery to call out the guy who could take his life. And he called him out on his lifestyle choices. So Herod we're not quite sure, but he divorced one wife, and we're not sure who originated that or when it happened. Had to do with kind of a land deal with a foreign king, and so it's a little bit murky there. But then his next wife was a peculiar option. He chose his brother's wife, who was also his niece. Can't make that up, right? So anyway, in order for him to marry his brother's wife, she had to divorce from the brother, who was kind of a stepbrother. They had they're the same brother, or same mother, but the niece sort of had a different family line, so the family tree was kind of weird. But nonetheless, it was there was divorce, which back then was was kind of a third rail, and then you had this family relation thing, which was also weird. And so John the Baptist just called it plain and just said, this is crazy, and this shouldn't be happening. Odd stuff. So now we can get back to the text. King Herod heard that Jesus was around and doing incredible things. When he heard all this, for by this time the name of Jesus was on everyone's lips, and he said, this Jesus has to be John the Baptizer come back from the dead. That's why he's able to work miracles. And others said, no, it's Elijah. And others said, no, he's a prophet, just like one of the old-time prophets. But Herod wouldn't budge. It's John. Sure enough, I cut off his head, and now he's back alive. And here's the story. Herod was the one who had ordered the arrest of John, put him in chains, and sent him to prison at the nagging of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, which is his wife. Isn't that interesting that the Gospel of Mark says it's his brother Philip's wife? So they're still holding on to that little accusation right there in this ancient letter. For John had provoked Herod by naming his relationship with Herodias adultery. Herodias, smoldering with hate, wanted to kill him, but didn't dare because Herod was in awe of John. Convinced that he was a holy man, he gave him special treatment. Whenever he listened to him, he was miserable with guilt, and yet he couldn't stay away. Something in John kept pulling him back. But a portentous day arrived when Herod threw a birthday party, inviting all the brass and blue bloods in Galilee. Herodias' daughter entered the banquet hall and danced for the guests. She charmed Herod and the guests. The king said to the girl, ask me anything. I'll give you anything you want. Carried away, he kept on. I swear, I'll split my kingdom with you if you say so. She went back to her mother and said, what should I ask for? A pony, perhaps? No, ask for the head of John the Baptizer. Yes, dream come true. I had no idea I could ask for such a thing. Isn't this crazy? Excited? Really? Excited, she ran back to the king and said, I want the head of John the Baptizer. This is so ridiculous. I want the head of John the Baptizer served up on a platter, and I want it now. This is crazy. I mean, you got to laugh or cry, right? Well, that sobered the king up fast. But unwilling to lose face with his guests, he caved in and let her have her wish. The king sent the executioner off to the prison with orders to bring back John's head. He went, cut off John's head, brought it back on a platter, and presented it to the girl, who gave it to her mother, And when John's disciples heard about this, they came and got the body and gave it a decent burial. I think Herod regretted this decision. I think he didn't really want to make this decision. I think he was intimidated by John. I think he was put into a terrible position and had to do it. And you couldn't put the toothpaste back in the tube. And I think he did not feel good about it. And so when he sees Jesus, he's starting to tremble a little bit in his boots all over again. He had regrets. I'm sure he had many other regrets as well. I'm wondering if you've ever had any regrets. Perhaps I'm the only one. Maybe you regret something silly, like something you ate, like that deep-fried liver I was telling my table about that was promised to be delicious, and it was as far away from delicious as you can possibly imagine. Maybe you drank something, or you drank too much of something, and that kind of caught up with you in some way. Maybe it's kind of light stuff like that. Maybe it's a FOMO thing, a fear of missing out thing. And so, you look back at your life, and maybe there was that time where you had an opportunity to take that trip or do that thing or go after that degree or what have you, take that job, and for whatever reason, you just said no. And now, in retrospect, you're like, I wish I would have said yes to that. And you have regrets for not saying yes to that. We had a person in church like that, by the way. This is years ago. We did a capital campaign a decade ago. And this gal who's since passed on asked me to come over to her place for a visit, and I did. And so we're having coffee, and I'm catching up with her, see how she's doing. And she says, hold on a second, I got to go get something. And so she comes back, and she puts an envelope down on the table. It's $8,000 in $100 bills. And I said, what is this? And she said, I want you to do something with this campaign at the church. And I said, where'd you get this money? And he said, well, when I first retired, I started saving this money so that I could take this big trip. And I kept putting it off, and then I got too old to take the trip. So she had this regret of not taking that trip. Sometimes we have regrets like that. Sometimes the regrets are kind of like that, but a little different. Maybe our regrets are, we wish we would have said that one thing back then that would have really helped that relationship prosper, but we didn't. And if we'd have said something maybe in a corrective measure back then, maybe we wouldn't still be dealing with some of the same things now. And we regret not having acted sooner. And of course, there's always things that we did that we regret. That we wish we could go back in time and hit the reset button. But we can't. It's done. And the question is, what do we do with these regrets now? So normally, I don't preach like this. Well, what does that even mean? I'm all over the map all the time. But today is extra practical because I just found some really good stuff as I started researching on regret and how do we deal with regret, that I just wanted to give you something really practical. So you have all these little things. I just want to speak into them briefly. And if you're dealing with something, maybe some of these will be helpful today to help you get unstuck or help you move forward in your process of regret. Or if you're one of those rare people who does not have any regrets. Don't you hate that, by the way? These people, you see these things on Facebook. I think John Cena was one of these, and he was like, live life to the full. I have no regrets. And I'm like, are you even a human being? I mean, come on. No regrets? I have only life lessons, no regrets. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, let's ask the people around you if they regretted some of your decisions in the past on your way to those wonderful lessons. I bet they do. So anyway, if you're one of those people that has no regrets, then just tuck this away because someday you might. And now you'll be equipped to know how to deal with them. So I just want to walk through them briefly, and we'll see where that takes us, and hopefully it's helpful. So the first thing on there is acknowledge what you're feeling and journal the complexity. So I've been a pastor, let's see, I'm coming up on the 23rd of July, I will have been a real deal Rev for 29 years. That's when I got my ordination in 1995. So I've been in this gig for a while, and many times I've had people come in just to sort some stuff out with me. I'm not a counselor, I don't pretend to be, but sometimes I listen to people for an hour or two and can help them out, and it's enough. And sometimes I refer them to somebody else. So some people will come in and they just start sharing, what's going on, and they know that I'm going to listen and probably listen pretty well, and it's going to stay with me, and and all of a sudden they just start telling me about this problem that's like this big. And I keep listening to it, and they're just overwhelmed by the problem. And because I've seen this so many times, after they're done, I say, well, this is something I think might be helpful. You've got yourself a ball of yarn here made up of lots of different colors of yarn. Or, as somebody said from the first service today, you've got a big string of Christmas tree lights all in a big ball. And you need to take one strand off at a time to sort each one out so that you can see it all. And that's what writing this stuff down and thinking about it will help you do. Because if all you have is regrets over the problem, you're not going to get very far. It's going to stay with you. It's going to be like a rock you're carrying around all the time. But if you actually string this thing out and see each piece of it in its complexity, you'll be able to do something with that. In fact, it's a neurological thing. An expert in the field says this: when you find the right emotion word for what you're feeling, it actually activates the orbital prefrontal cortex that connects your emotion center in your brain, called your amygdala. Once that happens, your brain can more effectively understand the issue and kick into problem-solving mode, as opposed to getting lost in the swirl of shame or overwhelm. So first step is to admit that you have regrets. Some of us won't even do that. Admit you have regrets, and then start thinking about those regrets and start wondering what led to those things and what was my part in that thing that I regret, and understand its complexity. And then, after you've done that, fact check your assumptions about your regret. Martha Beck in The Way of Integrity, which I did a series on a few years ago, she actually borrowed this from another person, but I've not forgotten what she said, that after you've kind of figured out what the thing is that is problematic, fact check it. Is what you're thinking, is how you're viewing this 100% accurate? Now again, because I've been in this for a while, I'll have somebody telling me their side of the story, their perspective of things, and I can tell pretty quick they're looking at this from one particular angle. Sometimes it's from a place of shame and guilt, and they cannot get over this for themselves. So it's like, I did all these terrible things, and I feel so terrible about myself. I'm carrying so much regret, and it's all what they did, and they need somebody like me to say, there's another side to this thing. There's another perspective here. And by the way, somebody did this for me a long time ago, and that's why I know it works. And this other person did for me what I now will tell somebody else to say, well, what about the other people who are complicit in this whole process? You were not alone. There were other players involved here. So don't hold all this shame and guilt for yourself, because you're not the only party. And then some people are on the other side, where they're so in denial about their own complicity of whatever the thing is, that they're just like, can you believe what that person did to me all those years ago? And you're like, well, okay, but you're a part of something. We never act alone. And so is it possible that maybe the fact check for you here is to recognize that this thing is more interwoven, and that's painful to admit. One of these things is liberating because you no longer carry all of the burden of responsibility, and the other thing may not be so freeing because, well, in a way it is, because it gets you started, but it's because you start owning some of the reasons for your problems. 100% sure helps you move forward in health. And I can help a little bit with that, and if it's more, then I can certainly refer you to some great counselors in the area. The third thing has to do with practicing forgiveness of really three things: of yourself, forgiving ourselves, which is hard to do, forgiving others, which is hard to do, and seeking forgiveness from somebody else, which is hard to do. All of these things take humility, because all of these things inherently mean that you are vulnerable enough to say that I need this, because maybe I blew it here or there. And maybe one of these is easier for you than another. I'm really good at self-hatred. I'm really good at beating myself up. I criticize myself royally every Sunday afternoon. It's probably why don't feel that bad. I don't really need an awe, but it's true, because I'll replay, the morning, and did I actually do anything of value, and this kind of a thing, and that's a normal part of me as an Enneagram 3 performer. So I just do that. For some of you, maybe it's something, another part of that forgiveness process of forgiving other people that have wounded you. And for some, I got to say this, for some it's people we need to be forgiven from. We're seeking the forgiveness of another. And sometimes it's as simple, but not easy, as starting that conversation and just revisiting a time and just being, again, honest and vulnerable about what you're there for and see where it goes. But I also have to provide this little caveat that for some of you, you have people that maybe you would like to talk to, but you shouldn't. There are appropriate boundaries, and there are some people in your life that you should not talk to again, maybe forever. And so your work then, or maybe the person that you need to have this conversation with, that you feel you've wronged, they've died, and that's difficult then to have a conversation. And so what are you left with? If you can't because of healthy boundaries, you can't because of death, well, one of the things you can do is you write it down. You write the letter to the person. It's cathartic for you. It gets it off your chest. You're doing the thing that you would do if you were right in front of the person. So you get it all ready, and then you shred it or burn it. You don't mail it. You don't hit send on the email, because that's a whole lot of wrong. But that's because that's not what it's about. It's helping release yourself from the tyranny, from the awfulness of this stuff you're hanging around. And then an interesting insight, this actually came from a whole different author set, but honor the loss of what might have been. This is really difficult to do. Sometimes it's a real loss that's happened because of our decisions or whatever. Sometimes it's the loss of a dream. Sometimes people in our lives make decisions that mean that the future is going to not be anything like anybody had hoped. And so there's a loss there that needs to be grieved. The person who provided this insight actually was talking about divorce, and of course all the regrets that come into that interesting, very complex relationship. And these counselors said, one of the problems in our culture is that we just get divorced and then we go on our separate ways as if nothing happened. He said, what really needs to happen, there needs to be a proper burial for that end of relationship, a releasing of it, a marking of it. I don't know what that is for you. Maybe for you, maybe there's a symbol of some kind that represents what that regret is for you, that decision that you did or didn't do or whatnot. And maybe for you, it's identifying that and holding it for a period of time, almost meditating about it, and then releasing it in some way. Maybe it's burning a thing. Maybe it is literally burying a thing or throwing it into the ocean or something like that. So you can say to yourself in a physical way, I'm done with that chapter. Now, done needs to be done in air quotes because we're never really done with it, but we've said I'm no longer going to be as in that chapter. It's not going to control me the way it has before. So give it a proper burial. The next thing has to do with broadening your perspective because you are more than your failures. And this has to do with recognizing, and this is really good news, and again, I've needed to hear this over my life, and I bet you have too, especially if you're maybe a perfectionist or something like that. We tend to define ourselves on our past mistakes. And we say to ourselves, well, I'm the guy who did that, or I'm the guy who lied about that, or I'm the guy who hid that, or I'm whatever that thing might be. That's not who you are. That's a thing you did. You are imago Dei. You are made in the image of God, every one of you. Do not define yourself by your past list of mistakes, but define yourself by the grace of God. Define yourself by your potential of shalom. There is nobody like you in the world. There never, ever will be. You're extraordinary. Don't let that get shadowed by some past misses, however great they might be. You are still a child of God. And God has not forgotten that. So hold on to that. And that's deep. That's deep stuff that can carry us. Another piece of this in terms of becoming in this new reality, because that's really what we're doing. This is a process of letting go and becoming something more. And the next piece is to connect with others who have been through something similar. Find yourself in community. Why? Because misery loves company. No, that's not why. There are better reasons for this. And there's a poem that actually helps with this. This is by a guy I've been following recently, and I've shared some of his poetry. His name's Rich Orloff. And I love what he has to say here. The poem's entitled, What I Can Offer. He says, I cannot fix your pain. I cannot solve your problem. I can't prevent the sorrow you're feeling or even guarantee I'll make you smile. However, because I've known joy embracing me and disappearing in the middle of the night, feeling safe and despairing if I'll ever feel safe again, lowering my guard and being ambushed by camouflage demons, and because I've also known the miracle of healing when pain seemed inescapable, the joy of connection when isolation had surrounded me, love returning and apologizing for its absence, because I have experienced enough no in my life to understand tragedy, because I have been surprised by enough yes in my life to maintain hope, because I've known all these things and more, I will gladly hold your hand so you don't have to face the pains of life alone, and I will wait with you patiently until the next miracle arrives. We need each other. We need each other just to be there. The Jewish tradition of sitting Shiva comes to mind. We are terrible at it. But the idea is that when a loved one is lost, in the classic rendition anyway, the lost loved one is actually in the home for like a week. And it's a way of letting go and people getting used to this transition that's happening. And Jewish neighbors and friends would come and just be there. Not to be constant noise like our TV's on to distract us from the pain, but to sit with us in silence in the pain, to let us know we're not going through this alone. We need that. Maybe you need that right now. And you just need somebody who you can trust and trust their love. Or maybe you know somebody who's going through it. And as hard as it may be, you need to show up and shut up and just be. The next thing has to do with learn the lessons your regrets teach you, because they are going to teach you. And the bad news is that these major life regrets that we have, unfortunately, there's no delete button so that they're constantly erased from us. They're with us the rest of our lives. The good news is they continue to teach us the rest of our lives if we'll let them. So there's a problem that I may have faced in my 20s. And the first time I faced it, it was a mountain. And there was so much to learn about that from this. And I felt like I'd come to the bottom of it and really resolved it and felt release from it even. And then I went through another year of life and marched up the mountain another ring. And you know what? Something triggered me to come back to that same old problem all over again. But it was different this time because there was another layer of nuance that I hadn't quite appreciated because I couldn't appreciate it because I needed to grow a year. I needed to get a little bit different perspective on it. Then I get released from it, feeling, I'm finally done with that. Then I go another year around the mountain. Guess what? Gets triggered again. Here I am, same stuff, same major issues. And I look at that, but there's more to learn here. And while it's really annoying in some ways, the other thing is that there's still more there to learn, more to heal, more to grow, more wholeness to find. And that's our whole life if we'll have it. So we can either be annoyed by it and try to resist it or just recognize that is life. And so we may as well embrace it, metabolize it, and become something more from the lessons that it has. But writing them down will also help us do that. Next to the last thing is allow regret to anchor you forward, not hold you to the past. This might seem counterintuitive because usually we think about anchors holding us, in place. But actually, if you go back 150 years or so and you look at bigger ships, especially if they were in very shallow seas and they didn't have much maneuverability, and if the winds picked up, sometimes shallow seas were more dangerous than deep seas. And the way they would get out of those situations is they would use a process called anchoring. And they would put the anchor in like one of their smaller boats on the side. And some guys would row the anchor out 50 or 100 feet or so and drop the anchor, and then the ship would pull itself forward with the anchor. You know what I'm saying? And then they'd do the process again until they were in deeper waters where they were going to be safe. There's a process that you don't hear about that so much anymore. Well, that anchor for us can be the lesson-giving regret that we have, but it can also be the shalom that we know is the fabric of the universe itself. The presence of God is always with us, that shalom, that promise that there's more for us. There's more that can draw us forward. And so I encourage you to think about it that way. If you're really in it, throw the anchor, throw your hope. That's the swing low, sweet chariot, is you're hoping for this thing that can give you the strength to get through that next chapter. The final thing is simply repeat as necessary and recognize that you will. You're never going to outgrow this. You're never going to outlive it. Don't feel burdened by that. That's life. That's just the way it is. And the sooner we can just embrace it and say, all right, here's that regret coming through one more time. Choo-choo. How am I going to deal with it this go around? It's okay. It becomes easier. It's one of the marvels of Dante's vision of purgatory, which we usually think of so terribly. But that was Martha Beck's whole framework, was understanding this move up purgatory. And one of the insights she has, which is true in the original, is that the climb up Purgatory Mountain on the way to Paradiso, the climb gets easier even if the decisions get harder. Even if the complexities and the nuances of the things that we struggle with are deeper and in some ways more challenging, they're actually easier because we've had so much practice on our way up in this journey. That's hopeful to me. And it rings true for my experience and many others. So I don't know what has sat with you with this or what is sticking with you today, but I hope there's something in all this that might be helpful. Because if you're a real human being, which I'm pretty sure you are, you're going to be dealing with this stuff. And you're not the first, you won't be the last, you're not alone in the journey, and you never can be alone in the journey. Because the God that we claim to recognize is a God who is always with us and amazingly doesn't let us go. Not in a punitive way, but in a redemptive way every time. That shalom is always there for us to call home. So let's pray together, and then I'll ask you to say with me a rendition of the Lord's Prayer. But if you will, let's pray. So Spirit of God, Spirit of shalom, you who know us better than we know ourselves, we can't hide anything from you. You are in process with us. We see your hand moving, which is different than an architect. We see you present in our journey every step of the way. And you're with us now. Even if we may be struggling to believe that you even are, you are, and you're here. As if gravity or air. You ground us. You give us life. And I'm confident, God, that your Spirit is at work in this space, is at work as we think about our regrets, what we wish we could hit the reset button about. And I'm guessing, God, that because your nature is love, that you love us enough to prompt us, to nudge us, to consider one of these regrets that holds us more than we hold it. Congregation, can you identify one of those that may be standing out to you more than another right now? And God, because I believe that you're active in this space and you're encouraging of wholeness, of shalom, that maybe you even have a reason for why that past mistake, why that regret is important for us to see today. And congregation, is there anything you can identify why that one might be especially important for you to notice today? And Spirit of healing, I believe that you're a God that might even have a nudge toward our next step in dealing and processing with the thing that is still with us so pronounced. Congregation, can you identify what might be your response to all of today? God, may we trust you. Trust your character as being redemptive, not punitive, of being restorative, not destructive, of healing, not hurting, of true, deep shalom. Dona nobis pacem. Dona nobis pacem. May your peace run deep in this space, in our lives, and through our lives today. To that end, I invite you to open your eyes and say with me this rendition of the Lord's Prayer adapted by Philip Newell. Let's say it together. Ground of all being, mother of life, father of the universe, your name is sacred beyond speaking. May we know your presence. May your longings be our longings in heart and in action. May there be food for the human family today and for the whole earth community. Forgive us the falseness of what we have done as we forgive those who are untrue to us. Do not forsake us in our time of conflict, but lead us into new beginnings. For the light of life, the vitality of life, and the glory of life are yours now and forever. Thank you so much for coming. Hope you had a great experience today. We'll see you next week.